So if I told you that there's a very strong chance that General RAAM is going to be featured in Gears of War E-Day story, would you believe me? Because according to Windows Central's most recent publication that was posted today, in that interview with Coalition's creative director Matt Searcy, brand director Nicole Fawcett, they don't confirm that RAAM is 1000% going to be in the game, but they essentially tease and smirk when asked about RAAM making appearance. But what's up? It's your boy Dynasty back with some Gears of War E-Day for you guys. Hard to believe that it's only been like a week since this game got announced, and I have over an hour of content in regards to this game, and mostly it's coming from both of these people, you know, brand director Nicole Fawcett, Matt Searcy, and today it's going to be no different. Granted, there's a lot of stuff being repeated, talking about the theme and the tone and getting back to the roots and making the Locust scary. I think around the 5th paragraph up until the 8th, that's when a lot of the, you know, new stuff actually gets mentioned. So if you bear with me for this video, I promise you it's worth watching. If you don't want to hear me talk about this new article, though, that was posted today by Windows Central, I have it linked down below because it mentions, obviously, General RAAM, and it also pretty much confirms that we're 100,000 gazillion% going to see the creation of the Chainsaw Lancer actually in this game. It's been teased and kind of hinted at, but we pretty much get confirmation that's going to happen. So I'm excited to talk about that. Also, multiplayer, you guys know even Cliffy B was kind of confused with the whole idea on why multiplayer was added to the Steam page, then removed. Is Gears E-Day not going to have multiplayer? It's kind of funny that I have to even acknowledge this, but it's going to have multiplayer. That's pretty much talked about in this as well. So before I break this stuff down, if you guys would do me a solid, I've been pumping out the content lately. Takes you a second. Drop a like on it. Still having a lot of fun talking about the Gears of War franchise, despite people thinking that it's come out of left field. It's not. I'm an OG, and I'm just getting back to my roots, like Gears of War E-Day is getting back to its roots. So with that said, let's talk about Windows Central's new article about Gears of War E-Day. Again, a massive shout out to Jez Corden, who we featured on the channel in the past. If you guys remember going back to the days of Mortal Kombat 1, Jez is responsible for leaking the likes of Homelander being a guest character before Mortal Kombat 1 was even officially announced. So I'm not surprised that Jez got the inside scoop from the Coalition, but he posted this on Windows Central today. Will Gears of War E-Day have multiplayer? What about Gears 6? The Coalition gives us some hints at the future. We caught up with the Coalition to learn about Gears of War E-Day in this interview. Kicking things off, they discuss Gears of War 5 and the end of Gears of War 5. It says, by the time we were done with all of that, we were well into the pandemic, Searcy recalls. A lot of folks were reflecting. We knew we were going to do Unreal 5. We knew this big tech update was coming. We wanted to build a bunch of stuff from the ground up again and reflect on the franchise and what it meant to us at the Coalition. That's why we had elements of the Mad World trailer in here. Those kind of vibes are what we love about the franchise. Again, the first few slides will just be simply everything that we've been pretty much talking about here on the channel all week long in various different articles being posted online, but it gets better, I promise. Goes on to say, E-Day is an origin story, Nicole Fawcett continued. It's the origin story of the bond that defines the franchise, which is Marcus Phoenix and Dom Santiago's friendship. When you first meet them, they're not the same Marcus and Dom you know. In Gears 1, they've already spent 14 years fighting Locust. Peace was declared on Sarah, and they had a hopeful future in front of them. There's also trauma and grief from the Pendulum Wars, stemming from the passing of Dom's brother, Carlos. Carlos was Dom's brother, but he was Marcus's best friend. So Marcus and Dom are not the best friends that we know of, yet. So the trailer set our emotional tone, as well as our visual tone, Nicole continued. Indeed, we learned over the past week that the trailer for Gears of War E-Day was entirely in-game, using in-game assets and lighting, and should be a good representation of the kind of quality players can expect when the game launches. It should be good representation of the horror too. You can see that we've wanted to reposition the Locust drone as actual scary, terrifying creatures. People remember Gears of War 1 of having these high moments of horror and being scared. We're going back to that darker, grittier vibe that people have in their mind when they think about the franchise. Nicole emphasized that while they're ramping up the horror, they aren't abandoning the franchise's emotional hooks, recalling some of the game's most painful sequences involving Dom and his wife, Maria, from Gears 2, or the climax from Gears 3. That's in our DNA. The cool thing about Gears is that it can straddle both of those things. You can tell dark and horrific stories about human suffering, but also offer hope, and what it feels like to have a squad at your back. And then having moments where you chainsaw a Locust's head off, and have it feel so fucking good. Now, this next slide is in regards to Gears of War E-Day having multiplayer. It kicks off by saying one question I got a lot of on social media this past week was, will Gears of War E-Day have multiplayer? I personally found the question surprising, but we do live in a weird time of subverted expectations. Every single Gears of War has competitive multiplayer in some form, and more often than not, a PvE multiplayer mode in Horde. Still, I sneakily asked Matt Searcy if players can once again expect Gears' frantic multiplayer combat to return. I say sneakily because the team really weren't ready to get deeper into the weeds on gameplay modes and things like that. But Matt did have some reassurances for those who were concerned. Now, this is the quote right here. It says, "I would say this is the next mainline Gears game," Searcy emphasized. "Gears has a pretty clear DNA for gameplay modes, so you can probably anticipate where we'll be going with E-Day." So, boom! If you are still concerned that Gears of War E-Day is not going to have multiplayer, this quote that I'm covering should hopefully, calm your nerves. It would not be a mainline Gears game if it didn't have our traditional multiplayer. Goes on to say, indeed, there are some things about Gears that will never change, like competitive multiplayer, but I was also curious how E-Day will subvert expectations. It's true that we've never experienced E-Day itself, but fighting Locust in a crumbling city does at least sound pretty familiar. I asked Matt and Nicole how they'd find ways to bring something new while also heading into the past. I agree, there's a lot of stuff we can do. On the story, there's a 14-year gap before E-Day in Gears 1. Even Gears Tactics was a few years into the war. E-Day isn't a world that's destroyed, it's a beautiful world of people who are in a time of peace. We see the Locust introduced through the eyes of people who have never seen them before and don't know what's going on, Matt explained. We're also going to change up gameplay stuff as well. We've worked on the franchise for 10 years, so we've got experience with revisiting enemy types, but also adding new weapons and maybe even new enemies as well. We'll do all that stuff. So there is your confirmation that we're getting both, more than likely, new weapons and also some new Locusts, which is exciting. Next up, we get some talk about the Chainsaw Lancer. It says here, Nicole chimed in with hints about the evolution of Gears' most iconic weapon, the Chainsaw Lancer, which indeed was a production born of necessity in the E-Day era. E-Day is the origin story of many things, including the Chainsaw Lancer. We'll see the Chainsaw Lancer was actually built after the fact, since there were no weapons that could pierce their super thick hides. We'll tell the story of how that came to be, and yes, you will get to use it too. So again, there's been a lot of concern that we wouldn't have this at all. Maybe it would just simply be in the story mode and kind of tease the creation, but no. Boom! You get to use it, and you get to see how it gets made. To close off this article is when they actually get asked about General RAAM, and here it is. It says, "We think we have a pretty good handle on what makes Gears feel great, but that doesn't mean we have to return to Gears to its simplest, most possible form. There's some things we tried that didn't work, and some things we tried that actually turned out pretty good. We know that there's this core, linear against all odds thing that flows through it, but there's room for us to play with that. We've got a whole city to play with." Matt continued by saying, "Gears of War E-Day is going to feel like a fucking kick-ass Gears game, like the one people have in their head, but it's going to feel like a new game too. It's going to have a new feel. It's going to feel fresh and good at the same time." Is RAAM going to show up, I ask? "We're not really answering story questions right now," the duo say, exchanging smirks. So that is the RAAM teaser, if you want to call it a teaser. I would not be surprised given the fact that, well, he's still alive and he's doing his thing 14 years prior his death. So I think it's safe to say RAAM is probably going to make an appearance in Gears E-Day, especially with, you know, the smirks they gave Jez when he was asking this question. So there you have it. That's everything I have today from Windows Central's new article about Gears of War E-Day. Multiplayer it's got to be a thing. Don't fret, don't worry. We're definitely going to see the creation of the Chainsaw Lancer and get to actually use the damn thing. General RAAM's probably in the game, and confirmation that we'll have new weapons and some new Locusts. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Hopefully you guys are stoked for this game. If you are, do me a solid and drop a like on the video if you're enjoying the Gears of War E-Day content from your boy. Of course, subscribe for some more of it. So next time, for your host, Ben Dynasty, guys, please take care, stay safe, I love you. Hope you're enjoying your weekend, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. 87
on it crack, but I'm not superstitious. Count all these racks, I be steady counting my digits. Slipping on the crack, I am not superstitious.